Okay, so we are making our way through this 8th chapter. And, the 8th chapter and the 7th chapter and the 9th chapter are the sections of this text that are teachings on how to bring bodhicitta once it's been arisen, once it arises, how to bring that bodhicitta to how to make it flourish. And so it's through diligence and meditative concentration, which is the object of diligence. Like we apply our diligence to meditative concentration. And then the 9th chapter, we apply our meditative concentration to wisdom, to prajna. And it's so the 8th chapter in developing meditation, the first phase had to do with, the first section of this chapter had to do with how to eliminate distractions, which are the, and by consensus, that is the like when we start to meditate, we go to meditate, the first thing that we experience is lots of thoughts that come up, and along with those thoughts are emotions. And so we need to do some rudimentary antidoting of those, of distractions at the outset. We need to know how to hold our mind, how to use our mind to avoid distractions. And it's not by banging your head against them or repressing them. It's by making your mind familiar with the topics that Shantideva presented, which will automatically melt or dissolve the arising of those thoughts. And then for the main object of meditation, what we are focusing on is the development of bodhicitta. We can think that here bodhicitta is practiced through the twofold practice of equalizing oneself with others, and when we have some familiarity with that, then exchanging self for others. And Shantideva presents various methods to do that. And now we've covered those, and now we have started to go through the what we do after having practiced the various methods, and we how to instill in our mind thoughts that will help our meditation. And first, as we covered previously, and of course Shantideva here is using, he's using what we're reading here is how Shantideva would be talking to himself or talking to his own mind, converting his own mind to bodhicitta. And so first, he, according to how Paltra Rinpoche divided up this in his teachings and then the commentary that we've been relying on, our Khenpo Kunpal's commentary, there's the gentle way that we make suggestions to our mind. And then then there was a section on a more forceful way that we treat our mind. Sort of a more scolding, I guess you could say, a scolding way. Mind is not a singularity. It's not one thing. It has many parts to it, and all those parts are moving parts. And so there's various methods that we need to use, or that Buddha taught to antidote all the risings of the mind. Okay, then this next section where we'll start tonight is on treating the body. This has to do with the body again. The chapter started out with lots of discussions about the body, and now he's returning to that. I mean, the body, of course, now the discussion of the body is in the context of following the development of meditative concentration on the bodhicitta, and what is going to impair or corrupt or distract the development of bodhicitta that we have developed to whatever measure. And so on verse 174 is where we have come to start. And Shantideva's saying here first is, to the extent that human form is cosseted and saved from hurt, just so to that degree that dwindles to a weak and fretful state. So these basically, this is the beginning of a lecture. Basically, Shantideva's lecturing his relationship to his body, and that that if we pamper our body, is cosseted and saved from hurt. If we pamper our body with lots of certain kinds of foods, our clothing, our possessions, all of the accoutrements of our life, if we basically overdo it. Of course, he's a monk, and so on that level of renunciation, there's a very clear a very clear, what do you call it, a demarcation. So to apply that to ourselves, of course, basically we should apply it to our own life, is what we're saying. It's not like just for monks or nuns, certainly. And we can, in other words, he's saying, according to how we pamper ourselves, our body, this is talking about our attachment to our body, then that weakens us. It will become weak, and it becomes more sensitive, like a baby's skin, who is very sensitive, and becomes weak like that, and it suffers greater. We suffer more when we've pampered our body. We get like fretful, meaning everything irritates us. Our ability to endure temperature and hunger and basically we turn our nose up at things that we have always avoided because we have become more, we've upgraded our, what we've adorned ourselves with, or what we've eaten, and so on. All of our gear. Even our, our phones, we have to have the most advanced technology all the time. And if things go slow, if the little tigle spins too long and things like that, we become irritated. The result of that kind of pampering is that there's always something wrong. Something's always off. Everything is wrong. If we think like that, then that should be a signal that we've been pampering ourselves, or things aren't supposed to be this way. That idea. So then we become weak and irritable. So we might think that, well, as long as we have the capacity to satisfy our desires, then we have a lot of great desires, but we also have a great capacity to do that. We have, the charisma. We have the money. We have the connections. We have the power to do that. Then what could be wrong with that? And then Shantideva then says there in the next verse, for those who sink to such a pass, the earth and all it holds are powerless to satisfy, for who can give them all they crave? So saying that there's no end to our desires. And maybe we probably have noticed that as soon as we get one thing, then we immediately start thinking of the next thing, or on the heels of satisfying one desire, there's another one. And what he's affirming, and what Buddha has taught in many ways in the sutras, is that there'll never be an end to our desires. Which means we'll always be cycling in and out of our attachments and our aversions as far as how we amuse ourselves, our possessions, and our the people that we hang out with. All when we're so used to being satisfied, our sensitivity is exaggerated. We've become hypersensitive. So that's his answer to just because we can satisfy our desires with what might seem like an effortless way, we shouldn't lose our way. And he continues here in the next verse 176. Their hopeless craving brings them misery, and evil schemes invade their minds. So we become the misery we experience is just this never-ending craving, and that also then gives rise to anger and all the other kleshas, mental afflictions, envy, jealousy, pride, and evil schemes. We can even engage in deception, stealing, and negative actions, negative behaviors, and we have a resentful view or attitude. On the contrary, then, while those with free, untrammeled hearts, that is, without when we don't have a craving for sense enjoyments or possessions, and have no almost no expectations. Expectations are very, when it comes to people, because we're talking also of desire in relationship to, we only want to be associating with people who are easy to get along with. In the slightest little eruption, and we separate, and things like that. So when we become free with a kind of when we become more open-hearted and accepting, not driven by desire, then that person, here it says, will never know an end of excellence. That's how perfect bliss is achieved. The next verse is, therefore, he's making a therefore meaning, like based on his counsel that he's giving himself here. So when we think this way, then we should also, like any time we contemplate in this way, then we should also draw conclusions and make resolutions based on our contemplation. And so he's saying here, therefore, He's making a resolution. He's resolving that for the increase of my body's wants, I'll give no space, no opportunity. So all my acquisitiveness I will uproot. I'll give no opportunity, even in regards to food and clothing. I won't make. No, we make choices in a lot of cases in order to be admired. And so, as he says here, of possessions, those things are the best that do not captivate by their attractiveness. In other words, no one, what he's suggesting here is that we eat and have our possessions and our clothing, which are the necessities of life. But we should not, we should we should avoid these things that that will arouse envy in others. That's the thing. That's we'll be comfortable. The best things are those that are procured without any difficulty, right? That's one of the, it's not how something looks, but how easy it is to get something. Should be a, what do you call it, a standard that we apply. If we basically, it's like take things as they come. Whatever's easiest to get, then that is what we should use. That way, also, when we lose it or when we die, we won't have any attachment to it. If things are difficult to get, then we'll be more attached to them. So he's suggesting here, if we become free of those standards, then we will be content with whatever comes. Our standards here, there's the three standards here. We should think in terms of, is it easy to get? Is it easy to keep? That is to say, others don't want it. It's not going to be stolen. And no suffering at loss. Those are the best things, the finest things, the things that will ensure that we'll have this feeling of richness, contentment. The Buddha taught of all the wealth, contentment is the best. And if we have contentment, then even if we have nothing, we'll be rich. That's something the Buddha Shakyamuni taught in many ways. Hmm. I'm sure that all the gurus and rinpoches, teachers, all teach that contentment. That's for a Dharma practitioner. That's almost the beginning is to be content. The Dharma practitioner. Okay, then next is 178. It says, now he's getting more into the physicality of the body. Dust and ashes are the body's final state. And we can ask, well, why shouldn't I cherish the body? Okay, there's all the other food and clothing and possessions, but shouldn't I cherish the body itself? So then he's counseling here, dust and ashes are the body's final state. This body, which inert, is moved by other forces. This body, which inert, is moved by other forces. In other words, a body itself, if we take body, it doesn't if the body is praised, the body doesn't feel it. You know, if the body is admired, the body doesn't feel it. It doesn't feel good because it got admired. Here's this, it's the mind. So we, as all along, of course, and in Buddhism and other ways of spiritual life, the body and the mind are not the same thing. And again, all of these practices are ways to distinguish, to isolate the mind. If we want to recognize and understand the mind, if we want to know our mind, then we need to isolate it from its possessions, and its body, and so forth, all these other things. Then we can begin to focus on it. So we should understand that the body itself it can't move itself. It relies on breath, you know, the prana, and mind. Mind is in charge. The body itself is inert. It's basically, the body is dead, except the fact that it has a mind. The body doesn't exist in its own right and have its own life. Also, and we know that because when we die and our mind or consciousness is no longer in our body, the body doesn't walk to the crematorium or doesn't walk to the funeral parlor. It needs to be carried by others. So it doesn't have that capacity. We should think about that. And then, of course, then Shantideva again goes back to his very severe language about the body. This form, so frightening and foul, why do I so regard it as myself? Which is the point here. So basically it's frightening and foul, meaning if we see what the body's actually, what the content of our body is. Why do we regard the content of our body as me, my body. Alive or dead, what difference does it make? What use is this machine to me? Me meaning here my mind. Like the body itself is no, what he's saying here, not he's, see, this is not, he's not philosophizing, by the way, and we should always understand all the teachings of Buddha are antidotes to the afflictions. They serve a purpose. There's no dogma that is presented in Buddhism. It's all advice on how to remove what is removable and arrived at the ongoing state of awakening. And in different contexts, one thing will be suggested, and in a different context, another thing will be accepted, or even that previous advice will be rejected. Because because if there's a context, meaning what is the purpose of the teachings? What is the teachings getting at? What's being antidoted? So I just, as a footnote, this way of, this has always been the theme of Shantideva. He uses very severe language, and it's always, there's always a target. He's not just preaching, like, okay, this is the way it is. The body is filthy, ugly, and foul. But there's a purpose in thinking that way, and that's to antidote how we are inseparably identifying ourselves as having a body, and in our body is our ego. We have that feeling that we are an occupant of our body. And when our body is sick or our body is hit, we feel pain. And of course, that theme has been developed in the many chapters, particularly the patience chapter. But here we're just treating our body in this way as to augment and enhance our practice of equalizing and exchanging. Alive or dead, what difference does it make? In other words, what difference does it make to my mind whether my body is alive or dead? It has no use to my mind. What difference will divide it from a clod of earth? Alas, that I don't rid myself of pride. If we don't use our body in the practicing Dharma, if we don't use our body in ways that will lead our mind to the truth, which is the goal of the Dharma. Simply, it's just the truth. We should remind ourselves, if we're Dharma practitioners, that all this is very complicated. All these goals and enlightenment and all the descriptions. We just want to find out the truth. We want to be the truth. And so if we use our body in that way, that's appropriate. If we don't, then it's a waste. There's no difference between our body then and just a shovel full of sand or dirt. It's just the inert thing. And this, we should get rid of pride. Specifically here, pride means that feeling we have that we can't help having, that this is me. This is, you know, my body. That pride. It's one form of pride, is that. Then 180, through lavishing attention on this body, that is providing for the needs of this body, again, such sorrow have I brought myself so senselessly. So now it's like in providing food and possessions and clothing and so forth, I've had to harm others. And create my own suffering. In taking care of my body, my mind will suffer. You know, this kind of, again, pampering my body, because of what has to occur in order to do that, I am creating negative actions that will be felt by my mind. And such sorrow I have brought, you know, I've harmed others, other beings. I actually, you know, steal things, food from animals and so forth, and exploited others. In the past, he's saying here also, then we've done it in the past. So maybe we've tried to live a very, what do you call it, you know, appropriate life, you know, paying attention to our carbon footprint, which there's some positive benefit to that, of course, as from point of view of developing maybe a more gentle personality. But in general, not in general, obviously, in truth, samsara and worldly, you know, to live in the world always involves negative actions. There's people in India now even that just they're naked and don't even beg. They just walk around until someone puts food in their mouth. They don't even touch it. And they have a big staff, a big jingle staff with rings, you know. And they move that so that all the insects go away. Every step, they go upstairs, then they have a cloth, they wipe each step before they step on it. All this kind of develop a very ahimsa, you know, completely harmless. But even that, if that's the best we can do as humans in this world, we still are afflicted by dualistic thinking, which is the core, which is the root of negative actions. So Shantideva here is reflecting how in the past, of course, now he's a monk. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he also maybe he's not of that level of like these ones cult sects in India, the Jain, but he's lived a very simple life. But in his past, he's had to survive in samsara. And it's, such sorrow have I brought myself senselessly. So from the point of view of achieving awakening, it's been useless. All the suffering that he's caused. What use is all my wanting, all my hating, all my attachment, aversion, all the causes of suffering? For what indeed is like a log of wood? So why cling to this body? Why protect it to such an extent? Again, he's talking about contentment, simplifying, for the purpose of uprooting this clinging to one's body as being me and my. It's not, there's no sense here that the world will be a better place, that the environment will be better, the economy will be better, starvation will be eliminated, exploitation will be eliminated. That's not the dogma that Shantideva is presenting. The purpose of this way of counseling oneself is to antidote the habit of clinging to the body as being me, my body. Whether I protect and pamper it, or whether it is eaten up by carrion birds, this body feels no pleasure, no aversion. Why then do I cherish it so much? So when we pamper our body's not pleased when it's eaten up by carrion birds. I mean, that's he's talking about death. The body doesn't feel pain. It's the mind that experiences pain. Like I said, you could pinch yourself and make it harder, pinch yourself harder and harder and harder, and then see very clearly that the body is not feeling any pain. It's my mind that's experiencing the pain. Try as a so whether it's eaten by carrion birds, it feels no. So again, the word inert applies here. It's the body feels no pleasure, no aversion. It doesn't mind if it's eaten by wild animals, and it doesn't mind. It doesn't. It's not. It's not encouraged, or what we call it. It's not happy when it's pampered. It's not the body that feels aversion. It's not the body that makes negative action. It's all under the command of the mind. Why do I cherish it so much? It's completely unaware of being helped or harmed. Think of it that way. Sometimes, my body is completely ignorant as to whether what I'm doing is helping it or harming it. Then, continuing, it says, resentment when it is reviled, or pleasure when it is esteemed, neither of these two my body feels. It's along the same theme. So why do I exhaust myself, for all the effort I make to be approved of, or all the effort I make to avoid being criticized? The body itself, it doesn't react. It itself doesn't feel any of that. We can see, oh, this is my mind. If I say I do it, since it's okay, then okay, well, I don't know. This Shantideva's reasoning here says, like, if I say I do it since it's loved by other people, in other words, well, I'm not dressing because I want to be admired. I'm dressing it because I know it'll make other people feel good. That's what that line is referring to. If I say I do it since it's loved by other people, others will appreciate it. Others, whom I thus regard as friends, since all appreciate the bodies they have, it says there, even worms and insects appreciate their bodies. Why do I not take pleasure in them too? In other words, again, this idea of equalizing, he's encouraging himself to equalize self with other. When we notice we're doing something to please others, we should reverse that. I should care for the bodies of others, protect the bodies of others, as if it was his. That's the idea of equalizing. I'm doing this for my body, but that makes no sense. But equalizing means, it's kind of reinforcing the previous practice of equalizing and exchanging. So that there's no difference between what I refer to as my body and what I refer to as other bodies. That's an arbitrary distinction that has no ground. There's no ground to that logic. Therefore, free from all attachment, I will give this body for the benefit of beings. So, free from all attachment to the body, with kind of selfish concern, I'll offer my body in the service of others. Without any attachment. Use it like a tool. Utilize my body. I offered my body to others. This is equalizing and exchanging practice, as in the previous section. And although it is afflicted by so many faults meaning, if you look at the inside of your body, it's a mess. It's something that is sort of on its way, always on its way to dying. We're always correcting, balancing, and nutritionalizing, nourishing, and say if we don't do that, it will on its own just decay. Like he says, like a log of wood above. It's just like a stump. You cut a tree down and there's a stump there, and it just slowly kind of rots away. So he's equating it. So, blah, blah, blah. And though it is afflicted by so many faults, I shall adopt it as my necessary tool. So we should regard our body, again, as an indispensable vehicle to gain awakening. It's an indispensable tool for practicing virtue. And so we should, the conclusion of this is to recognize the body as for what it is, and put it to its proper use. In other words, we need to have, as we've learned in this, in the first chapter, it talks about this how precious it is that we have a human life with its body. All sentient beings have Buddha nature. Anything that has a mind, that mind is Dharmakaya. There's no distinction among sentient beings. All beings have this absolute nature that is wisdom, omniscient wisdom. But it's not, and that wisdom has a quality of being known. From the point of view of our wisdom nature, it is already fully known, self-known, self-knowing. From the point of view of ordinary dualistic sentient beings, it can be known. But who is it amongst all sentient beings who can know its nature? Is a human being. There are certain qualities of interdependence with human beings. And some human beings are able to have more free time than others. It's just the existential fact. And some human beings have, or let's say, human beings all have various levels of cognitive capacity. And all humans also have some level of, or differing levels of being able to think abstractly. What if I did this? What would happen? That kind of setup, combined with all of the other factors, like encountering teachings that are encountering words in your life, like wisdom, like compassion, like introspection. If you hear those words, not everyone hears those words. If you hear a word like impermanence, this kind of thing. This is the kind of an individual who can move towards the truth. And one of the necessary ways of doing that is through having this human body. So there's no sense of disparagement. It's really just isolating what actually constitutes the physicality of a body, and then assigning the role of the supervisor to the mind. And the mind then can put its body to use. It's like a car. Like the people who collect these classic, like 50 Chevys and 32 pickup truck, 1932 pickup trucks, and then they put a lot of effort, a lot of searching for parts and sanding and grinding, and they're completely. That's cool. That's a hobby. But just except for that, just having a car, really the purpose of a car is to take you from one place to the next. Right? The more you invest your mind, and the more you invest your mind in the car like this, the more, because of attachment and fear, and how difficult it is to find these parts. And I mean, there's more suffering involved. I'm not taking anything away. I love seeing those old cars when I pass them on the street, but from here, I just point. I'm just as an example or a metaphor. Cars are so important in our life. That even if we don't have a car, they're important because we have to avoid getting hit by one. You don't know how many drunk drivers there are. It's huge. So anyway, cars are, the purpose of them is to go, and the more you invest in it, then the more worried you are. Every time you park it in a parking lot, you're kind of feeling kind of agitated the whole time. Maybe somebody pulls too close, or, all this kind of thing. So you have to park way in the back and walk farther. It takes longer, more suffering. Anyway, like thinking about it, like we were saying before, if you just have an old car, nobody's going to steal it. If it gets a little scratch or a little bump, there's a lot of scratches and bumps on it. You're not so worried. And if somebody dinks it with their door in a parking place, it's just another battle scar on your car. It's not a big deal. You can throw a bunch of you can throw a bunch of wood in the trunk. It's not going to make it dirty. And pick up hitchhikers. Doesn't matter if they haven't bathed in a long time. Just a car like that. You kind of don't have that. You're content. Doesn't matter. When it breaks down, you either fix it or you don't. It's either too expensive, then you expected it. You just kind of nurse it along. You don't just keep driving it. It runs out of gas. and you curse it. You know, what kind of a stupid car is this? It ran out of gas. God, it always does that. Why does it do that? Because you take care of it because it provides a purpose. But when it no longer answers that purpose, then you just let it go. Okay. So that we say there's an expression many places, Gampopa, others. This body, it's like a stone. If we misuse our body, it's like a stone that makes us sink deeper and deeper into samsara. If we use our body well, it's like a boat that takes us across samsara to enlightenment. So this body is a slave of a good and evil. I could say it kind of use those. 185. Okay, so that's the end actually of that section on admonitions, kind of like being tough with yourself about how you deal with your body. That's the purpose of that. You're kind of getting tough with it. So then the last, we're almost at the end. So these last 3 verses is Shantideva's kind of final injunction to practice meditation, meditative concentration. Because if we want to be rid of suffering, which is also another one of the purposes of why Buddha Shakyamuni taught, was to show a way to eliminate suffering. And the way that we eliminate suffering is to eliminate the cause of suffering. That's the Buddhist path. And so the mental afflictions are the cause of suffering. And so if we want to eliminate the kleshas, then it's important that we learn to let the mind settle into meditation. Here, by meditation, I mean sort of the meditative equipoise. And so, Shantideva is again kind of encouraging himself or making a resolution. Enough of all my childish ways. And as we learned previously, when he says childish ways, basically it means worldly concerns, being driven by the winds of worldliness, which is we do things because of wanting to be comfortable, and we do things because of not wanting to be uncomfortable. Pain and pleasure. We are driven by wanting to be approved of, praised, good job, little stamps on the top of your little papers in 3rd and 4th grade. They will have good job stamps. We still need little good job stamps. That's called worldliness, or avoiding, putting effort into avoiding being blamed is praise and blame. If that's what floats our boat, then that's called worldliness. And as Shantideva says, that's a childish way. That's not the way of the noble path, those on the noble path of awakening. Or those you do things to become famous, you do things to avoid being obscure, unknown, thumbs up, thumbs down. That's worldliness, childish, like that. So enough of my childish ways. I'll follow in the footsteps of the wise. Of course, the whole, we've already made the vow, the third chapter here, we already took the Bodhisattva vow. So I'll follow in the footsteps of the wise. Like we said, where is that there? Just as all the Buddhas of the past have brought forth the awakened mind, and in the precepts of the Bodhisattvas step by step abode and trained, likewise for the benefit of beings, I will bring to birth the awakened mind, and in those precepts, step by step, I will abide and train myself. So here we're talking about the precepts. So we've already we've stepped off the cliff already. We drank the Bodhisattva Kool-Aid, and so so he's just reminding himself, our habits are so strong. We need to have conversations with ourselves all the time so that we don't veer off into childish ways. I'll follow in the footsteps of the wise. So recalling their advice on carefulness, and we should, the fourth chapter, I read that a lot. It's really important to understand what it means to be careless and what it means to be careful, full of care or absent of care, mental. Recalling their advice on carefulness, which is to, having to do with body, speech, and mind. I'll shun all sleep and mental dullness. There's all these factors. This sort of encapsulates all the factors that dull our meditation, that that destroy our meditation. Actively destroy our meditation is this sleepiness and dullness. And on the other side, excitement and grief, and then desire and attachment, desire and then clinging, and then anger, and then doubt, self-doubt, doubting what you're doing. These are the 5 conditions that counteract achieving or maintaining meditative concentration. So know those, and know that. Watch out. Each one of them has an antidote. And so that's why it's important to study the general principles of the Dharma, because once you notice one of these faults in meditation, then you also need to apply the antidote. Like the Buddha's heirs in their compassion, who trained in meditation, I will bear with all that should be borne. So he said, basically he's calling forth the courage that is kind of synonymous with Bodhisattva practice. We've talked about many times earlier that there's this sort of heroic, courageous attitude and a temperament that can put up and endure with hardship. And so in a step-by-step, like it says in this precepts, we practice in the precepts step-by-step, means little by little. It doesn't mean just running off naked in the woods and just sitting under a tree. It means step by step, so that there's actually erosion occurring in your habits of self-clinging. All the different nooks and crannies of your self-clinging have to be exposed and antidoted. So that takes endurance and courage. That's the idea. So I will bear with all that needs to be borne. For if I do not labor night and day, when will my sorrows reach their end? So when will I be free? When will I realize the truth if I don't put forth effort? Time is short, basically. Even if we live a very long life, it's really short when it comes to achieving a practice, the results of a practice. So now if we read that, or Shantideva, if we emulate Shantideva here, then we emulate how he pledged to make an effort to practice. Then the final verse, thus to banish all obscuring veils, I'll bend my mind from the mistaken path, and constantly upon the perfect object I shall rest my mind in even meditation. Of course, constantly, or I will set your mind in this meditative equipoise, which is this meditative equipoise is nothing, it's the union of calm abiding meditation and what do we say, greater insight meditation, shamatha and vipassana. Like there's different approaches. The shamatha, you develop shamatha, and then when there's a certain level of shamatha practice that we've gained, then we're able to not be so flustered by distractions, but we can begin to let thoughts rise and then gain insight into those thoughts. We can look at those thoughts and uncover their nature. Basically, we keep looking at thoughts when they arise and looking like under the surface of those thoughts or through those thoughts. And so then both shamatha and vipassana interdependently begin to merge, and so then settling into that union, the merging, the blending of shamatha and vipassana is what's referred to as meditative equipoise. It just doesn't mean clinging to quietude, and your mind is very still and quiet, and you regard that as a standard to maintain. That's not particularly what's talked about here, or even maybe what, well, I'm not going to take away that, but, and the perfect object here, of course, means dharmadhatu, means abiding undistractedly in meditative equipoise in the nature of all phenomena, the nature of phenomena. I'll bend my mind from the mistaken path. In order to achieve that, I was going backwards in the verse. In order to achieve that, like what is the mistaken path? The mistaken path is clinging to appearances and simultaneously concluding that they are real in their own right, that they have their own existence, their own self-identity. They have their own, they have their own sort of self or their own identity. In other words, it's a mistake to cling to what's not real to be real, as if it were real. So one post-meditation is to always think of things as being an illusion. Everything is like a dream or like an illusion. That way you're not falling into the extremes of denying that things are appearing and then thinking that if I can only eliminate phenomena, then I would recognize, then I would come to the truth. So not falling into that extreme, nor falling into the extreme of that things do exist, that they don't exist, and that they do exist. In the next chapter, he takes that apart quite a bit, unpacks that idea, and how that saying that things are not real in no way denies that things actually are there. Just like you can't deny that you're seeing yourself reflected in a mirror just because you say that I'm not there. Mm-hmm. So that's called a mistaken path. Oh, there's two of me. I'm here and I'm there too. There's two of me. I wonder what they're doing when I go in the other room. Where are they going? Where's that me going? You know. So but you can look in the mirror and you can cry, you can feel proud, you can be attached, you have aversion, all the places come up based on that, you know. So it's not that it's nothing. So then, thus, to banish all obscuring veils. So how do we, like by obscuring veils, this is since he mentioned this here, I should unpack that a bit. So there are, okay, we can talk, like I mentioned, there's how the mind of a completely perfect awakened Buddha, a truly perfect Buddha, and our mind, my mind, are, there's no difference. There's no difference in that, in a Buddha's mind and my mind. But our mind, my mind, is temporarily obscured by veils. Veils. It's like, there's my fist. Where's my fist? It's temporary. It's there, but you can't see it. You can't see it. So that's veils, and there's one, and there's another. This what do you say? The main veil, not the main veil. That's not right. The fundamental veil, the basic veil, is ignorance. And ignorance means ignorance of the true nature of mind. It's not being stupid, making a mistake, not that kind of ignorance. It's more like ignoring what could be made obvious. So it's more of a verb than a noun. You know, ignorance sounds like a thing. It's more like the activity of ignoring. And as long as our mind is conditioned, in other words, as long as our mind is afflicted and affected by factors, various factors, as long as our mind is conditioned by ignorance, by this habit, by this ignoring, then mind cannot know itself. We can't perceive our own mind with our conditioned mind, our mind. And this ignoring means that we've mistaken the complete open, boundless quality of mind we've missed that, the essence, that open essence of mind. And this veil is the this veil is the sort of sets it's the foundation for duality. It's the beginning, or the beginning of duality. The first, the first mistake is not recognizing the open dimension of our mind's essence. And that becomes the framework, or the development of duality, becomes the source of or the root of delusion and the source of suffering. That's the first veil. And the second veil is habitual tendencies. It's our basic propensity yeah, it's our habitual, it's a propensity to continue to be ignorant, to continue to ignore, to continue to not recognize. That's a second, it's another veil. And this is what this veil obscures is our the lucidity, the luminous clarity of mind. And we, instead of recognizing mind's clarity, we posit a reference point. We create a point of view, sort of a dot in open space. So we relate to that central point, and it's that reference point appropriates all of experience as being its own, as duality. So it's a split subject. We become a subject that appropriates everything else as object. Then comes the mental afflictions, kleshas. That subject and object invites a relationship. There's relationships. This klesha veil obscuration is the development of relationships with between subject and object, and it's the lack of recognizing that there is this all-pervasive sometimes it's called responsiveness, or that open and luminous nature has an all-pervasive sensitivity or compassion sometimes, but it's has a responsive potential. And at that point, that's the veil under which we take objects to be real. And taking objects to be real then gives rise to the three fundamental poisons of the mind of attachment, aversion, and stupidity. I say stupidity, could say bewilderment, but stupidity is good enough. We don't have to quibble about words like that. Basically, it's not just not knowing, but because we don't know, we still act. That's, I think of that like stupid. It's not like ignorance. And from those three poisons then comes a pride, jealousy, and envy. And that iterates into what we term the 84,000 ways that the kleshas develop. Chemistry between them. That's the klesha obscuration, the veil of the kleshas. And There's the veil of karmic veil. So on the basis of the kleshas, we're led to act. And those acts are, since they're dualistic by nature, then there's positive acts, there's negative acts, and then there's neutral acts. And then we experience the effect of those actions, and the effects of those actions condition our mind, and we react. And the conditioning of our mind causes us to experience the different, what we term, realms of existence. What kleshas predominate an experience of a sentient being is called the realm of that being. So if hatred predominates in the experience of that being and you could say outshines or overpowers other kleshas, then that being experiences itself in the suffering of hell. We call hell. And if clinging and avariciousness and greed predominate, then the mind experiences itself. Its objective experience is in the tormented spirit realm. And the suffering is all the forms of hunger and thirst and so forth. So anyway, these are the four veils, and they are the target of all Dharma practice. And when those veils are removed, then that's called Buddhahood. In Tibetan, the term for Buddha, some I have mentioned this before, some, when they translated, his great Bodhisattva translators, when they translated from the Sanskrit, sometimes they use literal meanings. And sometimes they used I shouldn't have said meanings. Okay, some translations were translated literally, and some words were translated according to the meaning of the word. And Buddha, of course, in Sanskrit, Buddha means awakened or one, like an individual who's awakened. From the word, the root is Bud. It's the same as it also configures into Bodhicitta. And Bodhi meaning enlightenment, and Chitta meaning mind. Buddha means someone who achieved awakening. They didn't translate it as an awakened being. They translated Sonje. Sonje means, song means these veils have been purified. Song is when they say, oh, a Buddha has purified everything that needs to be purified, what was being referred to is these veils. Okay, we should be clear. That means song. J means that everything, all the qualities that have not been obvious but ever present have become, in other words, J kind of means blooming blooming, like a blooming or flourishing. Sonje means pure and blooming. That's a Buddhahood. Blooming, blossoming, I guess blooming and blossoming. That. So that is that's the end of the 8th chapter on meditative concentration. So as Alter Rinpoche says here, you can also refer to, he says you can refer to other texts that present these topics in a slightly different way. And whatever suits your mind, whatever suits your whatever's suitable, you should use that. There's no conflict or and specifically we're talking about the different teachings of mind training that exist. All the traditions of the living lineages of the Dharma of Mahayana Dharma include the various teachings on developing bodhicitta. It's the core of Mahayana teachings. We can say that up to this point, we've been talking about relative bodhicitta. Aspiration, some of these are aspirational features, and some of them are practical applications. Like when we're talking to ourselves in this way, and so on and so forth. Some of it's aspirational, and some of it's applicable, practical, engaging bodhicitta. And through this practice of equalizing and exchanging self for other, we undermine again and again, 5 seconds, 20 seconds, 1 second, 1 minute, 10 minutes, every second that we execute, that we practice these two practices, that we engage in these two practices, brings us closer to Buddhahood, removes the veils, cuts the habit. But this is very counterintuitive, almost, we could say. Intuitive would be like it's counter instinct. It goes against even maybe our DNA. How are we going to survive if we put others in front of us? I argued one time with anthropologists, about they're complaining about the Buddhism of compassion. It says it's not compassion doesn't work. It's anti. I didn't say anti-social. It's anti-cultural. Like places wouldn't exist if they were really practicing compassion. I thought, you're probably right. Yeah. So, yeah. So these things, it's like turning the tables on human not human, but on ordinary logic. And next week, almost next month, and we're going to have a retreat here and use the text that this is the root verses here, but how it's presented is in a slightly different way. And these are the 7 points of a great Kadampa master, a great early, like this book came to Tibet very early. It's one of the first texts translated into Tibetan. And it gave rise to a whole, what became a school or sect of, of, uh, practitioners called the Kadampas, whose main, of course, they had their, they practiced Tara, they had certain tantric practices, but their real thrust, it was in developing a lifestyle that embodied these principles. Like every night when they finished doing practice, they would close everything up, put everything away, give this, just prepare, make everything perfect, because then they might die overnight. Every night they thought like that. And they'd go to bed at night and think that, and then they would assume that they wouldn't wake up, and they would practice this exchanging self for others, developing compassion, and doing this exchange self and others, and discovering and resting in this meditative equipoise. And meditative equipoise, we could almost say, comes as a result of the elimination of duality. Like recognizing this non-dual nature is that maybe that's called realization. It's not called enlightenment. Enlightenment comes about by abiding in that, settling in that for a long period of time until all of our veils rise and dissolve within the context of that equanimity, and one is not distracted by it, by the rising of the veils. And from karma, like mostly we're sort of hacking away at the thorns, the edge of the thorn bush, which is kind of the karmic thing, karmic veil. And slowly we get to the thicker trunk, the branches, and thicker. We have to use more heavy-duty tools. And we clear away those, then we can expose the root. But every snip that you take away from a thorn bush is one less thorn there. And so it's like we say, Bodhisattva path is step by step. And so this is by exchanging and equalizing, we undo the habit of self and other as being distinct. And so we begin to get the scent of non-duality. So it comes about not through intentional practice, but through the result of these bodhicitta practice. Then it becomes, then we get into the wisdom chapter. That's I think I've tried to uncover a little bit. I'm just sort of studying a little bit and just communicating it. As I say, I received these teachings several times from different great bodhisattva enlightened masters. Kala Rinpoche, Deja Rinpoche, Chokta Toku Rinpoche, and I received this then from Tokusang Rinpoche. That's specifically this particular teaching on the of the Khenpo Kunpel's commentary to it, which is these days is one of the most, especially for the Nyingmapas, it's kind of a well-used commentary. There's many commentaries. I think in the Shastras, there's so many commentaries, the Bodhicharyavatara. But then, of course, Tibetans, our tradition is always new commentaries. Every generation has, every Rinpoche or every generation, they have to make a new commentary. They're very much into publishing. Tibetans, they love publishing. And so this Khenpo Kunpal is very contemporary, almost, we could say contemporary, because he was late 19th century, later part. And he was a student of Paltro Rinpoche. He was actually a distant relative of Paltro Rinpoche, but he was very poor. He practiced like a bodhisattva practice, where he was the one who would take his text at night. He had a little stick of incense, and then he'd read it by the stick of incense at night. And when the incense burned, then he would, when the moon was out, then he would follow the moon outside till it set. And he'd sleep a few hours, then when he woke up, then he would study again. So it's like that, like you said, Shantideva, like I exert myself day and night. He was literally saying that. He wasn't just using euphemisms. He said that kind of courage. Enlightenment, as we well know, enlightenment does not just happen naturally, just because you have it. So I think I'll just end. And at that point, yeah, definitely. Okay, so I hope you can refer and really go back and try to dig out and unpack for your own mind these verses. Even every day, if you read one or another chapter, particularly this fourth chapter and fifth chapter, and the first, second, and third chapters. And then there's also the patience chapter, and then the diligence. Okay, so let's we'll bring up the closing prayers, and then we'll end. And I hope maybe some of you have heard this 7-point mind training, or maybe you come and participate in this teaching. I'm going to do over 4 days, the 1st of September. And then all the virtue of this practice and all that is gathered throughout the 3 times, I dedicate to all beings without exception, so that they may attain Buddhahood. Following and emulating the omniscient and courageous Manjushri, and likewise Samantabhadra, I completely dedicate all virtue. Since dedicating merit is praised as supreme by victorious ones of the 3 times, I completely dedicate these roots of virtue for the sake of practicing excellent conduct. May the teachings of Lord Buddha, the only source of benefit and happiness, long remain in this world. May the lives of those who uphold these teachings be as stable as a victory banner. Supreme Bodhicitta is so very precious. Where it has not yet arisen, may it arise. Where it has arisen, may it not decline, but evermore grow and flourish.